point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and the amazing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh, philanthropist, world traveler, and expert on people, energy.
Yeah, we got a picture coming up.
We do. We have a picture coming up. We should start out. I should start out by saying every day I go to the internet. I've done this over 2,500 times. Over 2,500 times now. I've put up over 32,000 articles.
That's a lot of articles.
It's a lot of articles.
You've been busy.
I've been busy. That's just at the blog, which opened up on the 2nd of June, 2012. I actually started the work in 2011, shortly after the Fukushima disaster started unfolding. And what I do is I go to the web. I find what information I can about news relating to energy and climate change. For each item I find that is interesting, sufficiently interesting, I put together a short synopsis and a link to the original article, and then I post them at the blog, which is geoharvey.com, Geoharvey. I don't know who that's named after, but maybe it's me. Anyway, Tom and I get together on Thursday mornings and do this show, which takes the best of the blog.
The best of the blog.
Best of the blog. You got anything you want to say, Tom?
Yeah, usually about right now I pipe up and say that some of these things are very interesting and we could devote a whole show to them, but we don't have the time.
Yeah.
I'll try and call your attention to some of the better ones. And there are a couple this week I'm definitely going to call your attention to.
Yeah, there's a couple. Should we start?
Yeah, I think we ought to start with a picture.
We start with a picture and an item from Innovators Magazine.
And that is Chicago, and that's a funny looking bean-shaped thing up front.
It looks like it's an entrance to a subway or something. I don't know. Or a porch for an odd porch for a building. Anyway, what do you got for a title?
Big moment for clean power in the United States.
Well, there you go. Why Chicago? Chicago has become the biggest American city to commit to transitioning to 100% renewable energy, joining 118 other cities nationwide in making the move. The Sierra Club reported that Chicago City Council had backed the resolution to take forward the goal of making the entire city renewable by 2035.
A noble goal.
A noble goal.
Now this sentence came from the article. When a community stands united in its commitment to the values of environmental, economic, and racial justice, everyone wins.
Yeah, everyone except the people who are too heavily invested in fossil fuels.
Yeah.
You know, I read this article and I thought, and we'll get into this later, the fossil fuels industry is losing customers. And it's not just one or two people saying, I'm not going to drive a car. It's cities, it's states, it's countries, and they
got to be economics driving it.
Oh man, it is. It must be really depressing for these people, and you know they're saying,
"Hey, they've been making good bucks for 150 years."
Yeah.
I don't feel sorry.
We've got really good news. There's more oil out there than we knew. That's the news that I got from a fellow who was telling me about the wonderful, we have a future filled with prosperity because of all the natural gas and oil that we've found in the ground.
Which we're not going to use.
Well, we can't use it because our future full of prosperity is going to be pretty bleak. You know, it reminds me of a line from a poem that was written by Rudyard Kipling. Though we had plenty of money, there was nothing our money could buy.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What is it, the Native American statement about eating money?
Eating money?
You can't eat money?
You can't eat money. Well, you can if it's printed on cabbage leaves. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, we got an interesting one coming up here from CNN.
We do indeed.
And CNN is almost always worth looking at.
Yeah.
And this one is too, and I'll get into that.
Okay.
Trump appointed energy official. This is a quote. Climate change is real and we must lower carbon emissions.
Trump appointed?
That's what it
I wonder
says.
how long he's going to stay in office. A top federal energy regulator appointed by President Donald Trump is calling for urgent action to address climate change. Neil Chatterjee, a Republican from Kentucky, of all places, and he had been an assistant of Mitch McConnell, the head of the Senate. Neil Chatterjee is the chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Yeah, this is his exact statement. I believe climate change is real. I believe man has had an impact, and I believe that we need to take steps to mitigate emissions urgently.
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 You know, we've got another item coming up, and when I read that, I thought, if people can't see that climate change is happening, it's because they're either failing to or flat out refusing to open their eyes.
Yeah. Or, it's
and
ideological.
It's dangerous.
It's a hoax.
It's a hoax. Yeah,
And
well.
this is CNN, and there's a nice 4-minute video fact-checking Trump's misstatements. And it's not about, it starts out being about energy, but it's a whole bunch of things that he has said.
Yeah.
And it's 4 minutes, worth looking at. It's entertaining.
Entertaining. It's going to be interesting when.
Well, FERC has unanimously rejected Trump's rescue plan for the coal industry, which was to subsidize power plants.
Oh, boy.
Let's move on.
We've got an item here from Clean Technica, and this is a interesting one. We've got some
Yeah,
comments
this is an
about
electric
this too.
bus.
This is an electric bus.
Doesn't look any different.
Not much.
Yeah. More electric, this is about France, a French article, come from Clean Technical. More electric buses coming to Paris and surrounding communities.
RATP Group, the French state-owned public transportation company that serves Paris and the surrounding communities, has plans to replace all of its 4,700 conventional buses in its fleet with zero and ultra-low emissions vehicles by 2025.
That's what they're saying. And if you look at the bus, I'm going to pull it up. It looks quite normal. It's a 40-foot bus, just like the regular buses are now.
It has 3 sets of doors.
Now, the first 150 buses are due to enter service before the end of 2020, so this is coming up real quick.
Yeah.
And chargers for the buses are currently being installed, so they're getting ahead of the game. And for what it's worth, all the new vehicles will be made in France.
Well, that's not a surprise. What this means is that France is also going to be making electric buses faster than the United States. Which I don't think they ever
did before.
Well, the last time I looked at who was making electric buses,
it was the Chinese.
Close to 100% of them were made in China.
Yeah.
And
we've talked about that.
China was making them out producing the United States by a factor of about 100.
Is that all?
Yeah, well, they're making 100,000 a year, and we were making 1,000 a year.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, just as I did that research, I found a new factory for buses was opening up in the United States, and guess who owns the factory?
The Chinese.
BYD, Chinese company.
Build your dreams.
Absolutely. They've got a BYD as an acronym for or initials for Build Your Dreams, an interesting choice for a Chinese company. And what do? They want to build their dreams in the United States. And
save all that freight.
This is a $50 billion a year industry, and we're not really seriously engaging.
We will be, and it'll be economics that makes it happen.
Well, economics would already make it happen if it were just economics.
Yeah, somebody's fighting it.
Electric buses cost more than diesel buses, but they're so cheap that they get paid off in 4 or 5 years.
Well, there's almost no maintenance. That's the beautiful part about it.
And no fuel.
And no fuel, yeah.
Think about this for a minute. You drive down the street in New York City. You're in a diesel-powered bus. You run out of gas, run out of diesel oil. What do?
You call back home.
You call back home, and they send out a truck loaded with diesel, or maybe even a tow truck, because try buying gasoline in New York City. It's not easy.
No.
You can't find a gas station.
I can't think of one.
I can think of one.
Downtown.
I can think of one.
Yeah.
It's on the corner of what's the street that runs along the east side? There's the parkway that runs along the east side.
The Avenue A?
No, I'm thinking of the Roosevelt Parkway.
Oh,
And one of the entrances to them, around 63rd Street or someplace like that, has a gas station at it.
If it's still there.
If it's still there, it probably is. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, we got another picture coming up here. Might as well start with the picture.
Do we? No, this is Millennials talking about
that's the next one. Is the picture?
climate
Yeah,
change,
Millennial Republicans take a methodical approach to climate change.
We can talk about this, they said. This is from The Guardian. In January, 41 state college Republican chairs, this is the chairs of state college Republican student
So these are kids.
things,
Yeah.
signed an American Conservation Coalition letter to GOP leaders urging, quote, action on clean energy and environmental issues, unquote, to ensure, quote, conservative values are not lost on the next generation, end quote.
Well, they're talking about real conservative values.
Yeah. Which, of course,
like saving things.
Like saving things. You know, I keep telling people, if you want to see an American conservative, a real American conservative, look at Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah.
The people who are in Washington today would probably tell you that he was a socialist.
Yeah, they probably would. Well, there's a little takeaway there. The young Republicans, that's what this is about, are breaking with their party over climate change in an attempt to lead their party toward scientific reality.
What an
Conservatives
interesting idea.
that care about the environment do exist.
Yeah, they do. Okay, now we've got that picture, and here it is. This is a nice picture.
A couple of sheep, huh? Reclining.
I wrote an article on...
That could have happened on Western Avenue.
It could have. I wrote an article for Green Energy Times, and I'm using this picture with the article.
They look happy.
They do. I think this is a US DOE picture. Anyway, this article comes from Clean Technica.
How coal-killing solar panels can help U.S. farmers. There's the sheep sitting there under the panel, relaxed.
Yep, the U.S. Department of Energy has a message for farmers. Plant solar panels and you can plant crops too. The DOE published the Farmer's Guide to Going Solar, answering such questions as how PV modules change the microclimates beneath them and what effects they have on agricultural production. And I've forgotten, did we have a...
We've talked about this.
Oh, we've got the Fraunhofer report coming up tomorrow, in the next day on the show.
Well, I don't know that.
Well, I do. I checked. The Fraunhofer report talks about growing things under solar panels, and
this is evolving. This whole field is evolving.
It is,
and as farmers find out that they can continue their cropland and generate power for sale, they're going to be figuring out ways to do that.
Yes,
and one of the ways is to raise these panels higher, so there's something happening underneath them.
But in this case, the sheep are under panels that are at a kind of a standard height.
They're almost standard height. Well, if you look up on Western Avenue, that's what they've got.
Yes.
And every once in a while, the people bring in some sheep or some goats just to eat the grass.
Well, one of the Green Energy Times articles I wrote was about a pasture that was across the street from a field that belonged to a school. The school wasn't using the field, so they put in solar panels on it.
Yeah.
And what they did was they signed an agreement with a farmer who owned the farm that his sheep would come over and graze under the solar panels on a regular basis to keep the grass
down.
And there are strains of grass that you can buy seed for agriculturally, I am told, that are specifically intended for sheep to graze on, which grow as well in partial shade under solar panels.
There you go.
As they do in full sun.
But
we'll get back to that. Anyway, that was that. Should we go on here, Tom?
Well, let's see. By 2030, utility-scale solar installations could cover almost 2 million acres of land in the United States.
2 million.
2 million acres. The solution to preserve most of is to preserve most of the topsoil. Instead of leveling the entire footprint of a new solar farm, it's called agrivoltaics.
Agrivoltaics.
And shade from the solar panels conserves water, shields plants from excessive heat, results in bigger yields.
Yeah.
It's a win-win situation.
As I said, we will get to that.
Well, it's 186% more efficient, and we will get to that this
We
show.
will indeed. Just
exactly
a moment.
That.
Our next item, however, comes from Power Technology, and it's about Apple.
Apple surpasses renewable energy goals for 2020.
Apple has announced that it will exceed by over 1 gigawatt its goal of bringing 4 gigawatts of renewable energy into its supply chain by 2020. The company also announced that it has doubled the number of suppliers that run Apple productions on 100% renewable energy.
And there's a picture in this article.
Yes.
Okay, it's of Apple Park,
yes,
which is their headquarters.
Yes.
And I got a picture here that I can see, but we can't put it up. But it's a huge, huge circle.
We've actually had that on the show.
Have we? I don't remember.
It wasn't that specific photograph, but it was a picture
it's a
of
huge
Apple
circle, and inside the circle is a park.
Is a park with a pond.
There's a pond. There's looks like a field of corn.
Yeah.
Looks like a little golf course, maybe a pitch and putt or something like that.
Maybe.
It looks like a nice place to do your lunch, anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, in April 2018, Apple announced that all of its facilities are powered by 100% renewable energy.
Amazing. Apple announced that it will exceed that goal by a gigawatt. It's already achieved a 3 gigawatt goal, which it had planned to finish by the end of next year. This year isn't even half over, and they've already exceeded.
They've already exceeded it. Yeah. How about that?
We are up to Saturday, April 13th. I forgot to say, if you want to get to one of these articles, you can go to geoharvey.com and then click on the date on the calendar. So you would click for these next 3 articles.
There's a couple of these that are well worth looking at.
2 articles. Yes.
Okay. And we got another picture coming up.
We do indeed.
I think it's Seattle.
This is Saturday, April 13th, and it's from Gizmodo.
That looks like Seattle to me.
Yeah.
Washington State commits to running entirely on clean energy by 2045.
See, here again, you've got, for the fossil fuels industry, they are in a time of flat-out disaster. They've got city after city after city, 119 of them, including Chicago, saying, we're going to stop doing business with you. And now they've got states saying, we're going to stop doing business with you. Washington State is the 4th after California, Hawaii, and what's the other one? Is it New York?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think it's New York. I don't think it is.
Okay. Anyway,
well, that's Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
In the background.
The state of Washington is now committed to making the state's electric supply carbon neutral by 2030 and 100% carbon free by 2045. The bill makes it the 4th state to commit to 100% clean energy and adds a feather to the cap of Governor Jay Inslee, who, by the way, has declared as a candidate for the President of the United States.
Yes, he has. I have a note to that effect.
Yeah.
Well, among other things, the bill shuts the door on coal by saying it's the policy of the state to eliminate coal-fired electricity.
Yes.
And it's not such a terrible inconvenience for the Washingtonians because they're currently getting 3/4 of their electricity from hydro already.
Right.
Okay, and have been.
Yep. It is a bit of a problem, though, for the state of Idaho, which would be supplying them with coal. Montana. Montana would be supplying them with coal.
Well, they're not anymore.
No. But not only are they not using coal, they're not going to be buying electricity from plants outside the state that produce
No,
it
they're going to be generating it themselves.
Okay. Our next item is from YLE News.
Yes, it is. I don't know what YLE means. The cheap, safe, 100% renewable energy possible before 2050, according to a Finnish university.
A YLE, by the way, I believe is a Finnish
name. So
yeah.
Finnish is an unusual language.
It has lots of combinations of letters that look a little weird, like AA and II.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, but it's probably a good deal more rational than English. A global transition to the exclusive use of renewable energy sources is not only possible, but cheaper and safer than reliance on fossil fuels and nuclear energy, a study from La Prinranta University of Technology and the University Watch Group shows. Now, the University Watch Group is a German organization, as I recall. But they've looked at this and they're saying, yeah, we can do this. This is not going to be hard. And the more I see this, the more I see it's not going to be hard.
Well, they're not just talking about their own country. They're talking about worldwide.
Worldwide,
global.
yeah.
What do I say here? It says the study claims that the rapid development of renewable energy sources and energy storage technology will make it possible for the entire planet to reduce its CO2 emissions to zero.
Zero. And I want to point another thing out too. When they say carbon free,
Yeah.
that means also, from most people who are talking about it, not biofuels. So they're not going to be cutting trees down to do this.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a photograph coming up here.
Picture. Yeah, let's take the picture up. Bring the picture up.
And
that's another example of PVs over crops.
yep.
And it's interesting there, if you look at the picture, the wires are not buried in the ground.
Yes.
They may be, but I mean, that could be just the support.
Those
but
are
it looks like
supports.
the wires are in conduits along the top.
Well, they may be, but of course, if you look at those things that look like conduits, they've got angled braces between them, which indicates to me
They
that
can still be conduits.
they sure can be. They can be dual purpose. Yeah. Okay.
PVs over crops. It's an interesting
The
picture.
Fraunhofer Institute has, and this is the thing that we were talking about just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
The Fraunhofer Institute has conducted experiments in what it calls agrophotovoltaics for 2 years in Germany. In 2018, they found that potatoes they grew beneath solar panels did better than the ones that were in full sun.
Well, according to the headline, which I didn't read, combining farmer with solar is 186% more efficient.
Yes. And the way they figure that out is they say, okay, if you could take a field of agricultural crops and then put solar over it, let's compare that with the field without the solar and solar without the crops.
They do that here on the site, and there's an image there.
Yeah.
And I've got the data from the image.
Yeah.
It could be either 100% potatoes or 100% solar or 103% potatoes and 83% electricity.
So they're
That's a
losing a
win-win
little bit of
situation.
they're losing a little bit of the electricity by putting solar over the potatoes because they have to spread the panels out a little bit more.
But there's some benefits for the panels, for the land underneath the panels, because the solar irradiation was about 30% less in comparison to the open fields. But the soil temperatures were lower.
So
you're getting a little bit greater yield, just
you
slightly
get a
greater.
little bit better yield. Also, one of the things that had an effect here was that under the solar panels, the soil stayed a little bit warmer overnight. And so the potatoes could continue, the plants don't stop growing at night. They continue. During the day, they make sugars that they can use at night to grow, and they were able to do that.
I'm going to bring the picture back. If
Yeah.
you'll notice, they're pretty high up in the air.
They are.
So they can run machinery underneath these panels.
Yes. A lot of crops you don't need to run, have the panels high, but I've seen pictures of, and this looks like it might have been one of those places. They put the panels up high enough that they can actually run standard farm equipment under the panels.
Exactly.
And they do that.
Well, you can see by the way that crop is growing
yeah.
that something's been running underneath
Under
the
it.
panels.
Absolutely.
You can see that.
Yeah. And they were growing hay under solar panels and
Hey, how about that?
hay, yeah, and running standard hay harvesting equipment, baling equipment under the solar panels. Okay, we have a picture coming up now.
Do we?
I think we do. Oh, no, we don't. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's-
We're up to
that's
Sunday, April
next,
14th, with an item from Clean Technica.
Are we seeing a late combustion age collapse?
We are in the midst of a big transition, and big transitions are dangerous. Choices we make today will impact the future of our species. We could usher in an age of clean power that continues our species' climb out of poverty, or we could have a late combustion age collapse.
Well, I'm going to explain what he means by combustion age.
Yes.
We divide history into periods or ages.
Yep.
Okay. And what nearly always marks the beginning of a new age is a disruptive event that changes a significant portion of the topic in question.
Yes.
Okay. So by dividing history into ages based upon how we obtain energy, we can see why we're in the midst of major disruptions like global warming.
Well, we've got global warming going on, we've got peak oil going on, and we've got
major disruptions.
Technology going on in industries like the wind industry and especially the solar industry. And a lot of people,
the ages are changing.
Yeah, they are. A lot of people don't realize that solar panels are in fact related rather closely to computers. And the reason I say that is because the solar cells are silicon based, just like computer cells.
Okay, yeah.
And they have the same kind of curve in their development,
yeah.
Which is called the curve is an exponential curve, and it's described.
That's why they're getting so cheap so fast.
That's right, and it's described by an economic law called Wright's Law, which operates across all sorts of technologies. I was surprised to see that the technologies that included the automobile technology follows Wright's Law. If you had known that what Wright's Law was in 1900, it would have been fairly easy to predict that Henry Ford or somebody would come out with a car that everybody could afford, even though the cars in 1900 were so expensive.
Unaffordable.
Yeah. Well,
they were for the rich.
The solar cells are, I think it's a fairly safe projection that they will continue to go down noticeably for at least another 25 or 30 years at a rate that has already been established. And the reason for this is because the rate is a function of two things. One is the complexity of the technology, which in the case of a solar cell is more complex than you would realize because a lot of it has to do with chemistry. And the other thing is the demand for the product. So,
which is definitely going up.
Yeah. So, you know, we can project that is going to have a big effect on this change in ages. And I saw today, and this will not be in next week's news because I didn't include it in today's postings. I might include it tomorrow if I can get it from a different source. But the source that I saw, the headline was mistaken, apparently. But Bloomberg, rather, what is the BNEF? New Energy Finance.
Yeah. Well, that's what Bloomberg does, is financial news.
Bloomberg projected that the initial cost of a new car for if it's electric will be the same as if it's gas powered within 2 years.
I wouldn't bet against that.
Now, that's
not at all.
That's stunning because it means that you can go to a person and you can say, okay, I can give you car A or I can give you car B. They're identical in every respect except that one of them is electric and the other is gas powered. The electric car is going to have almost no maintenance and it's going to be very cheap to drive.
To run.
The gas powered car is going to have a lot of maintenance.
It's going to be a gas powered car.
And it's going to cost a lot to run. Which one do you buy?
Yeah.
Well, you might say, I've got to drive 300 miles a day, but then what I'm seeing today is that new electric vehicles are starting to kind of appear on the horizon that have a 300 or greater mile range.
Well, we talked about a battery yesterday. If they
develop it,
it's going to be a 600-mile range.
Exactly. So
there's people working on this.
There are. Okay.
Now the thing is going to happen, and it hasn't happened yet, to my surprise, is the infrastructure for electric car charging.
That'll be
Has
really
not
fast.
developed yet.
That'll be really fast.
It's got to be.
How many car charging places do you know of in Brattleboro?
Probably about a half a dozen.
Yeah, there's a lot. There really are.
Yeah.
Did you know that there was one behind the stone church? I've been told that there was. I haven't actually checked it. But I think there is
Well,
one.
I know there's one across the street in the parking lot.
Yeah, there's a couple in the parking lots here.
And there's also a couple in
one
the
in the
parking
parking
garage.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And there's a whole bunch of them up by the hospital, up by exit 1.
There's a bunch of them. Those are Tesla chargers.
Yeah.
We have an item coming up here from WTOP.
And we got a picture here, don't we?
We do. This is a distressing
Let's
picture.
get that picture there.
You know, people are wondering what it's going to look like. Now they can see. But why is it distressing?
Well, that is the Iditarod. If
Yeah.
you didn't guess, those are dogs.
Yep. That's a dog sled race.
Yeah.
And
it's
that
been
is
a
the
big
Bering.
one. I mean, it happens every year. This is a big event.
This is a
up in
big
Alaska.
event, and that is the Bering Sea behind it. Okay, what do you
The
got?
pace of Bering Sea changes startles scientists. That's kind of scary.
In the winter, frigid north winds blow down the Arctic Ocean, freeze salt water, and push the sea ice south. Now, it's important that this freeze salt water, because salt water doesn't freeze until it gets down into the mid-20s, 27 degrees, something like that. The ice normally
This
prevents...
is normally.
Yeah, normally. The ice normally prevents waves from forming and locks onto beaches, walling off villages. But this year, a storm pushed Norton Sound water up the Yukon River, flooding low-lying homes and villages.
That's
Now,
not supposed to happen.
it's not supposed to happen. Look at that again, that picture.
Let's get it again.
In a normal year, and probably every year that's ever happened before in history, I would guess, that view would be
Ice.
all the way to the horizon.
Yep.
But now, this thing was happening in February. You know, winter was well underway, spring was still a ways off. And what have you got? Open water.
Well, this is a takeaway from the article. Winter storm surge flooding is the latest indication that something's off kilter around the Bering
How
Strait.
could anybody not believe that this is really important?
Well, not if you live there. You're sure as hell not going to not
Well,
believe.
I'll tell you something. It goes on and it goes on, and not the next article, but the one after that we talk about. We'll see more about
And
it.
it's high atmospheric temperatures.
Yeah. Okay. We've got an article coming up from the Rutland Herald, and this is important.
GMP, Green Mountain Power,
Yeah.
all in on renewables and carbon free.
Officials at Green Mountain Power announced an energy vision to have all the energy the utility supplies be carbon-free by 2025. We're talking about less than 6 years from now. And all of it generated by renewable sources by 2030. I should point out some of it is carbon-free, according to some people, but not renewable, because they're still buying a small amount of power from the Seabrook nuclear plant in New Hampshire, and that they can't
That's
stop
carbon-free.
buying that because they've got
They
a
got
contract.
contracts, yep.
Okay, their current energy supply is 90% carbon-free and over 60% renewable, a company statement said.
Well, we're getting a lot of our power from Hydro-Quebec.
Right.
And Hydro-Quebec happens to own Green Mountain Power, so.
Well, they're both owned by the same.
Both owned by the
Metro.
same, same entity.
Yeah.
So Green Mountain Power serves more than 75% of Vermont.
Yep.
Virtually the entire 3/4 of the southern
Yep.
part of the state.
Yep.
Up north, there's a bunch of small local utilities, all of whom, for the most part, are renewable already.
Yes. A lot. I've forgotten how many of them there are, but there's a surprising number of
There's
them.
a bunch of them.
Yeah,
little
surprising number.
One-town utilities and stuff like that.
Right.
yeah.
Should we go on?
Well, let's see. The state that GMP serves more than 75% of Vermont. They state that much can be accomplished to cut carbon and at the same time increase reliability.
There you go.
So it's a win-win
I
situation.
want to point out, increased reliability, probably decrease costs.
Well, they're going to keep the difference probably.
They will do what they can, but they're regulated. They have to
Yeah.
ask permission to lower the rates.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we got
up
another
to
picture coming
Monday,
up here.
April 15th, and we have a picture here.
Yeah, this is going to be happening here in about a week.
Yeah, my little cherry tree, the buds are already opening up. I don't know when
It's
the leaves are
happening.
going to
It's
be.
just
We have
starting.
a peach tree that has got its leaves out. Not they're still tiny. Our fig trees, the buds are working on the fig trees, and we're starting to put the. In fact, I've got 3 little citrus trees arriving today by post.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Figs.
citrus.
Oh, citrus. I thought you
2
said
of them are
citrus.
Australian finger limes, and one is a blood orange, and they're all grafted onto what is called flying dragon rootstock. And the flying dragon rootstock has a hardiness that will allow it to grow in zone 6, which is where we are,
Okay.
arguably. And I mean, the zone 6 is the minimum winter temperature goes to 0 or to 10 below, and it did not even get to 5 below this year in Brattleboro. At least I
Well,
don't think.
let's talk about this one.
Okay,
Climate change is making the allergy season worse.
again, climate change. CNN, between 1995 and 2011, fewer freeze-free days meant 11 to 27 days added to the pollen season for most of the U.S. Research shows the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, which does an annual survey of allergy seasons, noticed that they have been growing longer every year.
Well, this is
Obviously.
CNN, and almost all the time CNN is worth looking at.
Yep.
And there's a video here about this, exactly this. High pollen counts are causing allergies.
Right.
And we've talked about it.
Yep. And obviously, anybody who's going to allege that the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America is motivated by a desire to convert the entire world to international socialism and using climate change as the ruse that's involved to get that to happen,
I don't think so.
must believe that
I don't
almost
think so.
everybody is involved in this conspiracy. And if almost everybody's involved in this conspiracy, why don't they just do it? Well, okay, should we go on?
Yeah, the next one's related to this.
It is, and this is from Clean Technica.
Air pollution increases emergency room visits. The largest U.S. study on the topic confirms it.
A study published online in the American Thoracic Society's American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine, that takes almost the entire synopsis up, just that title, shows that as levels of ozone and fine particulate pollution rise, more patients end up in emergency room. Why is this a surprise?
Well, this fine particular pollution that they're talking about, basically we would call smoke.
Yes.
Okay, and
Although
you
it
have
could
no
be,
problem breathing it, but when you do breathe it, bad things happen.
yeah, it collects in your lungs, and it is usually smoke that is so dispersed that you don't really even notice
You
that
don't
it's
even
there.
notice it's there.
You might notice a faint smell, but you don't see it unless you might see a bit of a haze, but the haze could just be humidity.
Well, what this is talking about, this isn't just coughing. This means you're so disturbed that you take it to the ER.
Yeah. So this adds to
This is
medical
significant.
bills. This hits the insurance companies. It hits the budgets of states and local governments. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah,
again?
we got a picture coming up here.
We do indeed. Not a great picture, but
No, but it's a very
illustrative.
interesting picture.
Yeah,
That happens to be a picture of the Rio Tinto mine in Australia.
yeah. A Rio Tinto mine.
A Rio Tinto mine.
Rio Tinto, I should say before we get into this, Rio Tinto a few years ago was the largest coal mining company one of the largest in the world. It might have been the largest. Certainly it's one of the largest mining
It's
companies.
certainly up there.
It still is one of the largest mining companies in the world. But what do you have for a title?
Rio Tinto promises not to undermine renewables and not to prop up coal.
What?
This is an
What?
about face for these guys.
It sure is. It is an about face. Australian mining giant Rio Tinto has pledged to support renewable energy and climate action and to, quote, publicly argue against, end quote, government subsidies of coal power while using its significant clout to urge associated industry groups to do the same thing. In other words, they're going to bully everybody around.
Well, it sounds like they are.
Yeah, this is what it sounds like. They're basically saying, look, we've got a problem, and if you guys aren't going to play ball on this thing for your own reasons, then we'll give you reasons to play ball. And this is happening in Australia, which has a federal government.
A lot of coal.
It has a lot of coal, but it has a federal government that
supports it.
Wants to support coal. And you know, if these mining giants, which by the way are going to solar power to power their mines because they're wiping out back.
Well, Rio Tinto sold all their coal assets. They're out of the coal business.
They
now.
sold their coal assets. They spun off Cloud Peak Energy, which reported
went bankrupt.
a month ago was about to go bankrupt. They still owned about 50% of Cloud Peak, but they sold that off about a year ago. Now Cloud Peak is in serious trouble and can't pay its bills, and Rio Tinto is just saying, that's it, we've had it with coal. We're not supporting coal. We're not supporting anybody who's supporting coal. So we are extending...
There's a lot to this article.
There is a lot to this article. And as I said, Cloud Peak Energy is going bankrupt. That is the thing that was one of the biggest coal mining companies in the United States. They're going under.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Well, let's move on.
Okay, we are up to Tuesday, April 16th, and we've got an item from CNN.
German prosecutors charge former Volkswagen CEO with fraud. Wow.
I think we were expecting this when this whole thing broke a couple of years ago. This is, as I said...
This isn't over.
No, it's not over. German prosecutors have charged former VW chief executive Martin Winterkorn with fraud in a case related to the automaker's diesel emissions cheating scandal. The charge carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison.
Well, this also is CNN.
Yep.
They got a video.
Yep.
And the video is about the VW scandal. And it shadows diesel's future.
Yeah.
And we don't realize it, but in Europe, everything's diesel.
Yeah.
You know, almost everybody's driving a diesel over in Europe.
Yeah.
And diesel sales now are way down.
Well, the fastest selling model of any car in Switzerland last month, what do you suppose it was? Biggest
Tesla.
Tesla Model 3.
Yeah.
And Tesla Model 3.
And also in Norway.
And also in the Netherlands. You know what's happening? Tesla is getting to be bigger than Ford and GM. And it's not producing anywhere near as many cars, but Ford and GM have both got very problematical futures. Obviously, VW does, which is why VW is changing over to electric vehicles.
I think that's a, how would you say it, emergency on their part.
If BNEF, as I mentioned, if they're correct about 2022 being the year when the two meet, when an electric car is the same price, this is without incentives. An electric car is the same price as a gas-powered car. These companies are going to have to scramble during those 2 years to get themselves converted, to stop making gas-powered cars because they won't be able to sell them.
They won't be able to sell them. Well, VW's already announced that they're going
VW's already announced. And, you know, we're seeing this in one industry after another. The reason why this is happening is because the price of batteries is going down. And that means that you can, and the batteries are getting lighter, and that means that you can build a car that will drive farther. And, you know, we're changing, and we've got people who are resisting the change.
Well, this guy, Winterkorn, is facing possibly 10 years in prison.
That's right.
This is a particularly serious fraud they're accusing him of.
It is, yes.
And basically, that he was aware that the diesel emissions were being manipulated.
Yeah.
But he failed to tell anybody.
Well, and just so people know, the whole deal with this diesel emissions thing was that the car had software in it that would sense, because it's got a computer, the software would sense whether it was being tested.
On a road.
On a road.
Or in a laboratory.
Or in a laboratory, actually. Yep. And if it saw that the steering wheel was not being turned, it would say, "This is a test."
Yep.
And then it would put
They cheated from day one.
Yeah, they had their emissions
This wasn't
control
accidental.
unit operating when the test was going on. But when it was on the road and the steering was being turned, they knew that they were not being tested or believed
And there
it.
was a big difference.
And there was a big difference. The car was much peppier, and it also produced about 10 times as much pollution.
That's pretty big.
It's a big difference.
Not 10%, 10 times.
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we got a nice picture coming up here.
We do. What do we have a picture of? We have a picture of wind power. By golly, who'd have thought?
Look at that, huh?
Yeah.
It's our zero emission future.
This is from Common Dreams. A low-cost shift to clean energy is now feasible for every region of the world. This goes back to being like that report we just got from Finland. Owing to the plummeting costs of solar and wind power and breakthroughs in energy storage, the total system costs of renewable energy, including transmission and storage, are now roughly on par with fossil fuels. And what they're talking about here is worldwide.
This is a good article. A lot of suggestions as to what we can do about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good article.
Yeah, and one thing that we could do, by the way, just, you know, for anybody who wants to have an idea, one thing that we could do, because fossil fuels are about the same price as renewables now, we can invest in renewable energy and say, okay, we're going to make a lot of money here, and because this is the biggest, you know, we've got to draw down the carbon. We've got to stop emitting the carbon. And if you think about how big the task that is,
That's a big task.
It's a big task, but it's also
It's doable.
probably the biggest investment opportunity in the history of man
Never thought of that.
and woman. Yeah. It is a huge investment opportunity, and it's going to save a lot of people a lot of money. This $100 trillion cost of the Green New Deal is pure and utter made-up hokum. And I'm not kidding about that. I looked it up. It was just a guy heard Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking, and he said, that's going to cost $100 trillion.
Yeah.
It's not exactly figured out. On the other hand,
Came out of the air.
on the other hand, the material that exists in people who have actually done studies indicate that the energy costs associated with that would actually drive prices down for ratepayers.
Well,
Okay.
this article doesn't pull any punches. This is a quote from the article.
Yeah.
The main obstacle is inertia.
Yes.
Politicians continue to favor the fossil fuel industry and traditional
No, of
agriculture.
course they do. They're paid to.
That's exactly what they're saying. Mainly because they don't know better or are on the take.
Yeah, on the take.
Right from the
Which,
article.
according to the U.S. Supreme Court, is absolutely legal. So we can watch them do it. We can even see what the actual figures are. Okay, our next item is from CNN.
This is interesting. We've talked about these guys last week. The Extinction Rebellion.
Yep.
Extinction Rebellion protesters blocked some of London's busiest roads and bridges. By the way, folks, this is not going away quickly.
No, it's still going on, and it's spread to the United States.
Yep.
Thousands of people took to the streets in central London, blockading some of the busiest roads and bridges to raise alarm over the mounting climate crisis. They are part of a global campaign orchestrated by the British climate organization Extinction Rebellion. Extinction, I talked to a guy at the World Wildlife Foundation, and I said, wait a minute. You guys, your published figures indicate we're going to see another species go extinct in the 21st century on average every 10 minutes. And he said, that's right.
Well, this is from CNN.
Yeah.
And there's also a nice little video.
Yep.
It's only about a minute and a half.
Yep.
But there's a lot of pictures. There's a slideshow here. It's a good.
If you like watching people getting...
Now, this is a pretty interesting website to visit.
Yeah, it is. Okay, we're up to Wednesday, April 17th, and we have a picture
We
here.
got a picture here.
We have a picture.
Who's that?
Of Elizabeth
Warren. And as the title says, Elizabeth Warren calls for a tenfold increase of renewable generation on public lands
and waters. PV Magazine USA is a source of this. Elizabeth Warren, U.S. Senator and presidential candidate, announced her plans for a targeted expansion of renewable energy development on public lands, along with a moratorium on new fossil fuel leases and other measures.
Well, she's got three proposals, and I'll read them because we've
Yeah, go ahead.
got enough time, I think, to do it.
Okay.
On my first day as president, I will sign an executive order that says no more drilling. A total moratorium on all new fossil fuel leases, including offshore drilling and public lands. Second thing she says, I want to increase the amount of solar, wind, and geothermal generation on public lands and offshore waters 10 times.
That's a factor of 10.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, 10 times. And finally, we will strike a balance between ecology and development by prioritizing sites with low impact on local ecology, but high potential for renewable energy generation. Every one of those things makes sense.
Every one of them makes sense to me. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, I think we can.
Okay, we've got an item from S&P Global Platts.
Indian Point nuclear plant added to decommissioning portfolio.
What does that mean? It means they're closing the place down, gang.
Yeah.
Entergy said it will sell Indian Point Energy Center to Comprehensive Decommissioning International, based in Camden, New Jersey. CDI is a jointly owned subsidiary of Holtec International. They said jointly owned. Did you notice who the other one was? It says Holtec. I would gather from the article that it's jointly owned with Entergy, but I might be wrong about that.
No, I don't know. Jointly owned it.
I don't think they were clear.
They weren't clear.
A company buying nuclear plants that are closed or scheduled for retirement.
Well, that makes sense.
It was scheduled for retirement.
It makes sense. Instead of doing it themselves, they're hiring experts.
Absolutely. And they know this thing is closing down. They're admitting that the thing is closing down. They know they're not going to be able to keep it open. Donald Trump is not going to save it. Andrew Cuomo, is it Andrew Cuomo still? There was. I'm lost.
It's not
Governor
Andrew.
Cuomo,
Governor
whoever
Cuomo.
is
Andrew was his father, I think.
Yeah, Anthony.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I can't
remember.
think of it.
Anyway,
Governor Cuomo.
Governor Cuomo is not going to save it. He might try to save some of the other states that are farther upstate, but it's
well, one of the things that's happening when they sell these plants to the decommissioning outfit is they get decommissioned in months rather than years.
Well, in years rather than decades, I think is probably.
That's probably a bit more accurate. Yep.
Okay.
But that's right. Yeah.
What do we got here? We've still got a few minutes to go, and we've only got one item left on the schedule.
Yeah, we got the last one.
Well, let me put up the picture of the pump jack.
Let's look at. That's a pump jack, isn't it?
These pictures, by the way, almost all of the pictures that I use are pictures that I find at the article.
At the article, right.
For some articles, a lot of articles don't have pictures. And so what I try to do is I try to have every other article at the blog have a picture. And the synopsis is always the same size. And the reason I do this is because years ago I found that a very intelligent person I knew had read the blog and he commented on an article that I considered rather unimportant and didn't even notice the next article, which I considered important. Well, it's because the synopsis for the unimportant article was twice as big.
Oh.
So that's my take on it. And so when I started putting the photographs in the blog, which was something that one of the readers requested, I experimented a little bit with the photos, and I came to the conclusion that if you have a photo every other article, that means every article is next to a photo, either above or below it.
Okay.
So the photos don't say this article is more important and that article is less.
Okay.
And that way I've got the articles in the publication are not, I try to keep them so that people can make up their own mind what is the most important. So this, at the end of assembling the blog, which takes a couple of hours, I look and I see where I've got photos, and I organize the blog articles according to that. And then I may find that there's a spot where I don't have a photograph and I have to include one. So this is
This is an important one. This is from CNN again.
This is from CNN, but they didn't have a photograph I felt I could use. So
well, this is what the article says. This is the title. Oil and gas industry has way too much control over Congress.
Right.
Duh.
Duh. In October 1992, the U.S. Senate ratified the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The Senate ratified that. It's a treaty that the United States has entered into and ratified. Since then, the U.S. Congress has failed to pass a single major piece of legislation to implement the treaty. The reason is because of oil and gas campaign donations.
Money is speech.
Well, you know, you've got the it wasn't the State Policy Network, not the Heritage Foundation, the Freedom Partners. You know, there's this huge number of organizations. I think there must be at least 100 of them that exist at the state level.
Freedom Partners.
Freedom Partners is heavily paid for by Koch Industries, Koch brothers. That group.
It sounds so patriotic.
It does. Everything they do sounds patriotic. And they want to claim that they're saving democracy from socialism.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had friends, as I mentioned to you, I've had friends who would look at Benjamin Franklin and say he was a socialist. See, he wanted the U.S. government to own the postal system.
Yeah.
That's socialism.
That's socialism.
And so
the highways are socialist, too.
I mean, doesn't it tell you that something's wrong when they say that the founding fathers of the United States were socialists? But what they've done is they've turned this country into an oligarchy.
Yeah.
A plutocratic oligarchy.
Yep.
They've taken the wealth of 3 or 4 people and the reputations of those 3 or 4 people and parlayed them, leveraged them with the wealth of about 300 other people into controlling the conservative wing, pseudo-conservative wing of the Republican Party, which has nothing to do with conservatism as far as I'm concerned, which has parlayed into control of the Republican Party, which they parlayed into control of the U.S. government. So 3 or 4 people, I'm maintaining, are controlling the U.S. government. This is about as bad a level of control as we've had ever.
3 or 4 people.
3 or 4
You've
people.
You've got it narrowed down to that.
Wow. It's not the 1%. It's not the 1% of the 1%. It's not even the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. It's just, there's 300 people who are putting money into Freedom Partners, and Freedom Partners put the better part of $1 billion they said they were going to put into the 2016 election.
Well, have we read the time? This? Well, I don't know. We have.
Yeah, the reason is oil and gas.
I did read the title.
Yes, and I read the stuff inside.
Well, this is a good site to visit.
Yeah.
And if you've got the time, there is a 16-minute video. It's called "The Future Will Be Terrifying." And it's a talk by a guy named David Wallace Wells, who wrote a book called The Uninhabitable Earth.
Well,
it's very scary.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, I have seen a lot of stuff. If you think about this, I've been doing this since April of 2011. So that means I've been on this for 8 years. Yeah. And during those 8 years, I've probably seen somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million headlines of articles. Probably.
Yeah.
And that, you know, if you look at the 13 or so average titles that I have up every day, and you figure it's 20, it's close to 30 items for each one. You do the math. It's, you know, it's easy to come up with 1 million. And I see these things come up on climate change, and I have been seeing how terrifying the future will be according to some of them, and how it doesn't have to be terrifying according to others. And I'm in the ballpark where it doesn't have to be terrifying. We do not have to have a terrifying future. But
no, we don't, but we got to change.
We got to change to do that. And in order to change, we're going to have to change our ways. And a real conservative who would look to Theodore Roosevelt and not say he's a socialist, which is pretty right-wing, would, I think, agree with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
And if you look at Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign platform, and you look at Theodore Roosevelt's 1912 campaign platform,
not very different.
They're not very different. They're pretty much the same document. And it's, you know, I even talked to one of our local representatives in Montpelier, who Emily Kornheiser, That's her name, yeah, Kornheiser. And I mentioned that to her, and then the next time I mentioned it to her a year later, she said, "Yeah, it's really amazing, isn't it?"
How about that?
How about that?
So she was listening.
She listened. She checked it out. She is a very bright person, I think. Anyway, having endorsed Emily Kornheiser, I will say,
Well,
Tom.
the article here talks about tracking the money in politics,
Yeah.
and it's kind of scary.
Time for us to say goodbye.
I guess it is. So
Yeah.
let me pull us both up so we can both say goodbye.
There we are. Bye, everybody. Come back
Adios.
next time.